So what is the JavaScript syntax? Syntax is simply the way a program is written. So we have all these different languages. For example, HTML, the hypertext markup language, has its own style that you write it in. That's the syntax. That's all it means. That's what syntax means. It means the way in which that language is written, and that's defined by the creators of the language. Now, there's going to be a very popular acronym. An acronym simply means each letter is a word, and that acronym is API, and it will constantly keep popping up. So we really have to understand what is an API. API stands for Application Programming Interface, and every language on the face of the planet has its own API. What is it? Well, an API is simply a collection of functions and also properties as well. So let's have a look at this. We have the window object in JavaScript. If we take a look at this in our console, we can see that a window object has many functions. These are methods. These methods were not set up by us. This was set up by the just-in-time JavaScript compiler. So this program automatically defined these functions and properties in the window object. In and of itself, we didn't need to do anything for that window object to be defined. It was already defined for us. So in that case, that is the JavaScript API in a nutshell. It's just a collection of functions and properties. Likewise, we can also have APIs inside of APIs. For example, let's say I download the all-popular jQuery library, which probably most of you have come in contact with. Well, jQuery attaches onto the window object, and you can see here with the $, jQuery is an API. It has its own collection of functions and properties. This is what's known as an embedded or extension API. So that basically means that jQuery needs the JavaScript API to define its own API. So jQuery is just using those native APIs that come with JavaScript, those native predefined functions, and then it's using those in its own functions and creating its own style. But it's not in and of itself a completely different language. It's an API extension. Therefore, it's adding on to. Or you could call it an embedded API. That's what libraries are. And whenever I create, let's say, an object within the window object, because everything goes inside of that window object, and we'll learn more about this later. But whenever I create an object with my own methods or my own functions and my own properties, I'm essentially creating an API. You don't have to give it a name, but that's what you are doing. You are creating your own API. So remember, JavaScript comes with a JIT compiler that takes your human readable code into ones and noughts, and a JIT compiler have their own native APIs or predefined functions and properties right out of the box. Otherwise, if it didn't, you wouldn't be able to create your programs. And you can extend onto the native API by creating your own API. You could create your own library, or even just creating a grouped set of properties and methods. You are creating an API. So again, to pull up the window object, simply go to your web browser, go to any web page, right-click, inspect element, and then go to the console tab. And from there, you just type in window, and that will bring up the window object. Now, every single window, doesn't matter whether the window is in a tab, so you have many tabs, or many different separate windows, it doesn't matter. Each one of those windows or web pages has its own window object, and each window object is isolated from the other. So, in essence, one web page can manipulate the window object and add stuff to the window object that's different from the other one. So each window, each web page has its own window object. Then also what we have is the API, or Application Programming Interface. A lot like when I'm interfacing with other people. You can think of the people as the programs, and we're interfacing back and forth. And these programs encapsulate, meaning put together, their own APIs, such as their own properties and methods that you can invoke, Like, for example, with jQuery, you can actually start to set up a new jQuery object and then start to modify it and so forth. So jQuery's got its own API. It's all encapsulated together. And of course, you can have APIs embedded inside of other APIs. We have the native JavaScript API, and then we have the embedded jQuery API. Then finally, what you've discovered is about programming language execution. Programming languages can either be executed by an interpreter, compiler, JIT compiler, or AOT compiler. In the case of JavaScript, it's a JIT compiler. And the JIT compiler will take your instructions just in time when you need those instructions, and it will take them off and it will convert them into machine code or gobbledygook, ones and zeros that your computer's hardware can actually understand. And it also does some other optimization processes as well. So that is essentially how JavaScript and its syntax is used in the browser.